course.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just excited to be here. So thank you for everybody.
Yeah.
So my name is Harvey Castro. I'm an ER board certified doctor here in Dallas, Texas, serial entrepreneur, creating a range of companies ranging from vitamin companies to, at one point I had over 30 iPhone apps that I developed when the first iPhone came out. And then fast forward, I have extensive training in just businesses because I've started them. I have my MBA, but then move forward to AI. I started playing with ChatGPT in late November, right when it came out. And I thought, this is the iPhone moment I had in my mind. And I said, you know what, let me create a product. And I obviously don't own ChatGPT or healthcare, but let me create some interface of combining ChatGPT and healthcare. And let me teach doctors how to use this and patients how to use this. And so I wrote the first book that's on this side. No, I always think the opposite, this one. And then last week I created this other book. And this one is, the second book is more patient related, kind of going through the Q&A. The first one was just like 10,000 feet high, just kind of introducing the level to people, because people never, I mean, a lot of people don't even understand AI in general. And so I was just trying to show them how different things are being used right now in healthcare. And so where I am today, I work for a telemedicine company called Vital Health. I'm the chief clinical operating officer, but simultaneously, obviously, I love ChatGPT and what it does. And more importantly, I love AI. And so I'm bringing AI concepts into healthcare and being a consultant to different startups. So that's me in the skinny.
Great.
Do you have any examples of using ChatGPT in healthcare?
Yeah. So obviously the number one barrier, or there's two big barriers. One, the hallucination effect, which you guys know well. Two is the privacy laws. And so how to get around the two, not that I'm promoting the book, but the second is, I talk about it in the book, but basically the skinny is I created an algorithm, and it's pretty simple. It's just that if you're an expert in the field in healthcare, but you're asking ChatGPT a question outside your field, you may not know that the hallucination effect is going on, because you may think it's correct and in reality is wrong. The second, with the privacy laws, if you're combining the HIPAA in the United States calls for 18 parameters, and if you violate any of those parameters, 18 of them, then you can be in violation of HIPAA. The final is obviously the FDA. Interesting enough, how you use the tool will determine if the FDA thinks this is a medical application. And so how to use it today is the low-hanging fruit. I think it's a combination of two things. Number one, I divide it into two populations and three scenarios. The skinny is the two populations being doctors, the other patients. On the doctor side, medical students, doctors are using it for education. I know I mentioned the hallucination effect, but they know enough medicine to be dangerous and also to know their limits. So I'm pushing the doctors to make sure that they're not going into fields that they don't know and getting that education. It's fields that they already know to learn more about them. And so on the education side, I'm seeing doctors creating flashcards. I'm seeing them creating summaries. I'm seeing them use the technology for what we call differential diagnosis, meaning when I see a patient and they show me XYZ symptoms, in my mind, I think, okay, it could be the following diseases. And my job is to exclude and come up with the disease. And so doctors, believe it or not, we have a knowledge base that doubles every 72 days. And so the amount of information that I'm expected to know is huge. And so fast forward, ChatGPT is able to summarize and give me medical information within my space. So I know I threw a lot at you guys, but that's basically it. And then the other obvious one that I'm seeing is medical websites are using this to create content, and they're obviously running it by a physician to give it its blessings to make sure that it is correct.
So how about from the patient side? Would they put in a bunch of symptoms or something like that and expect it to give them some sort of diagnosis or what?
Yeah, and that's my worry, that is going to start happening. Just when Google came out, doctors called it Dr. Google because they kept coming with symptoms. So I'm cautioning. That's why I wrote the second book. I'm more concerned about how can we address this as an issue. If it's something that's not going to be life-threatening between you and I, who cares? Because it's not going to do any harm. The problem is every person is educated in healthcare to a different degree. And so they don't know if this is something dangerous or not because they just don't know the knowledge. And I know that seems like common sense to us, but to some others, they may not be. And so my bigger worry is, for example, in third world countries where you can self-diagnose yourself, go to the pharmacy, pick up some drugs and take it. And two errors happen. One, do they have the disease? Second, are they taking the right medicine? And then third, is it their side effects? So there's just so many things that I think it's good up to a point. If you wanted to help your diet and you're not allergic to anything, and you even say, hey, I'm allergic to eggs, give me a diet, I don't see that much of a harm because you're making the food, that's basic. But if you're saying, hey, I have diabetes and I'm taking this drug and that, is there interaction? That's where it gets a little hairy, especially since you're not getting any references from ChatGPT.
Hey, Harvey, I have a quick question, actually. So on that topic where people are misdiagnosing themselves, that it makes a ton of sense, right? I'm wondering if it opens up a world where we kind of do triangulation diagnosis. So basically, with the advent of telehealth, where it's easier to kind of get access to multiple doctors, maybe it's kind of like you self-diagnose, and then within kind of 2 or 3 clicks, you can kind of toggle through 2 or 3 doctors and be like, hey, these are my quick symptoms. Are there any kind of red flags that you think I might have? And then it's kind of like, okay, perfect. I got like 2 or 3 check marks from a couple of doctors, and then you can kind of get a heavier drug that may cause side effects.
Yeah, that's a good point. Since I work for a telemedicine company, I've been approaching the company already to create what you just said. So not so much self-triage, but more of a platform where you yourself come up with, let's just pretend you decided to go on ChatGPT and diagnose yourself with X. Being able to upload that data to our server and a doctor look at it and basically give its blessings and then have a full conversation with you.
Yeah.
One of the errors, and I'm getting a little geeky here, but I was a physician, whatchamacallit, CEO for a staffing physician company. And one of the errors in malpractice is when the nurse or the patient start taking a doctor down a certain path. And the doctor has to be cognizant enough to say, wait, I'm not being very wide. I'm just being so narrow because the patient, the nurse, everyone told me it's this. And I start going down that path. And then I diagnose the patient that. But in reality, it's got to be done right, is what I'm getting at. Because what happens is you want to have that wide look. Because if you start taking me down a path and ChatGPT and all this data says this, and I'm like, oh, yeah, that's what it is, then we're going to cause issues, if that makes sense. But I think it can be done. And I think I think we can create that interface. So
yeah, I appreciate that. And it sounds like the patient in that last example there was that the patient basically seeds the conversation. So they kind of open up the door and it's like, okay, you joined this one house of these are all the kind of possible alternatives for that house, but really you should be in a totally different neighborhood, basically talking to the patient. Gotcha.
Yeah. And so, honestly, I see, not to labor this issue, but I do see this working really well on niche markets. And so if somebody has a history of thyroid disease and that's their only disease, and this could create, like, there's already companies that create a community. And so the community is just for thyroid, but then now you add ChatGPT and then you're giving the blessings from the doctor. I fast forward this thing. I think this is going to be the way healthcare is going to be delivered.
Mm-hmm. Or what about a
situation? Can I get back on one of your, I heard you say a couple of examples of how it can be applied in healthcare. ChatGPT related systems, and one of them was like an AI assistant seems still a bit far away, where like a doctor or like an AI assistant would tell you which drugs you should use, because you mentioned 2 problems. One is the hallucination, and one is not having references. And I just wanted to get back on that, because I think I've been thinking of those 2 specific problems a lot for the past months. And I've been working on it too, to see if I can find some ways to work around those things. And I think that if you integrate a model, an AI model like ChatGPT, with your own knowledge, with your own set of documents that you can see as being the truth, then you can actually get around a lot of those hallucinations, and also you can refer to documents that are seen as truth, right? Your own knowledge base. So yeah, that's what I've been working on. And I'm wondering, it's like, how far do you think this is away? And like maybe it could be, maybe I can help you if you're interested in that. You mentioned it last time that like you want to maybe make something, right?
No, I do. I do want
Yeah.
to create a product. I mean, to keep the skinny, I don't think it's going to be ChatGPT. I think it's going to be a GPT.
Yeah.
So with that said, BioGPT, I think it's going to be the winner in my opinion. But who knows? It could be BART, or it may be I'm bad with acronyms. It may be MedPalm from Google. Maybe that.
Yeah.
One.
Yeah.
But I think creating what you're saying, just these two new products will solve the references issue. And so I think I don't think we're far, to be honest. I think it's just a matter of getting the APIs to these databases and fine tuning them. But I think we're pretty much close.
Yeah, I've discussed like being like you can of course create a completely different model on a very specific domain. Like like what did you say? Med
Thyroid. Thyroid
Yeah.
was my example, but yeah, that's what I was thinking. It's going to work. Is doing a very niche part. That way, your error goes down, and then you can self-train the large language models to create that niche.
Yeah, but that's probably, I think, the most expensive way to do it. And then there's, I think, I see it like this. So there's two other ways you can do. You can probably fine-tune a model like GPT-3 in order to be to work well in your niche. But you can also use, and that's, I think, the most interesting one. If you can use a general purpose language model like GPT-3, like ChatGPT, and you can apply it, integrate it with your own knowledge base. So it can still give you all the answers, but you don't need to kind of train it at all. You don't need to fine tune it, or you don't need to train anything. So the upfront cost will be way lower.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree with that.
It's and I mean the fine tuning one is already solved, right? That tends to work really well. In the last couple of years, there's been many examples of that with GPT-3. But I think the integrating it with your own knowledge base seems like, if that is tackled in a right way, it's like applicable on almost everything.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, this is something I wanted to ask from you guys as well, that in general, I see pretty much everybody jumping on GPT models nowadays to basically try to create value. But where do you see, not as much as application side, more on like technical opportunity side? So where do you see the, like I said, basically the gap that can be filled? Because how you access any of the OpenAI models, for instance, is as severe black box as it gets. You can't even train against it because the gradients are not propagating. So basically, there is, so what Winan was saying, so you can either do refinement, or you can try to integrate with the knowledge base, although that part is a bit unclear to me how. So that looks as a very interesting topic. So if you could elaborate a bit more on that, that would be great. And there's a third one, which is like basically prompt engineering. So you could have like a supervisory network in between as a middleman, basically, because the problem with GPTs is that they are very often creating this illusion of intelligence, whilst in reality the only thing that's guaranteed from them is that it's going to be legible text in a particular language, but that's it, so nothing about the content. So if you wanted to address the content part, that must be done on like so basically an explicit higher level semantical beast must be developed in addition to a GPT model.
Yeah, exactly.
But then so basically, do we even have that, or are all the companies and people, etc., who are now interested in GPT aware of that gap? That okay, we have like in the middle we have like a building block missing. So
good question. Yeah, I definitely think there are some very important building blocks that are needed next to GPTs in order to get a good integration and for products. And one of them, like you mentioned, I definitely think is like how to integrate it with a knowledge base, because the main limitation, I think, for ChatGPT is definitely hallucination and also not referring to any source of truth, because it's all hidden in the layers of the model.
Yeah, it doesn't know.
So if you would be able to integrate with a knowledge base, you would solve both of those problems, because you would always refer to a source of truth that you have written down somewhere. And what I'm using now is called GPT Index, and I'm also creating my own alternative from that. It's an open source library on GitHub, and it lets you basically integrate your GPT with knowledge by kind of searching through that knowledge using the same language model and asking questions about those documents, basically one by one or multiple at the same time, depending on how big the documents are. And it's kind of a semantic search, what you're doing then.
Yeah.
So where's it getting the knowledge from?
The knowledge base? Well, that could be a set of documents.
Where the source of the knowledge. What's the source of the knowledge? Like the internet or what?
Yeah, for ChatGPT, the source of the knowledge is the internet. But for example, for an app in healthcare, it could be a bunch of information that you have gathered yourself, and it could be like in the form of written text. So it could be a book, for example, maybe. That could be the knowledge base, a book or a database.
So somebody is curating the sources, or?
Yeah, that could be yourself. That could be the company that is selling the product.
Did you try the NHS, websites?
So you can actually ask the ChatGPT or the GPT to not give an answer themselves, but make sure that it always refers to something in your own knowledge base. That's possible if you do good prompt engineering. And I think that would definitely solve a big limitation of ChatGPT and other GPTs. And then another one, because you were asking for more limitations, right? Another one is the context size. I think it's very important because GPTs ChatGPT has about 3,500 words as a limit. And after that, it tends to get really bad. The results just gets vague, and it makes more mistakes if you input more words than 3,500. So that's the context size is definitely a big limitation. And what I've seen is sometimes you, for example, might want to ask a question about a book of 3,000 pages or 300 pages or whatever, hundreds of thousands of words, and then it doesn't fit in that context size. But if you want to solve that, you can also split up your book into multiple chapters and then ask every chapter separately, and then get the result of that and summarize it again. And so that's I think a solution to that. It's probably not always possible, and sometimes it becomes also really expensive if you do it like that, and also slow. But it could definitely help to be able to interact with bigger contexts.
Hey Balaz, what is I don't think we've met before. Can you just tell me kind of where are you at in the kind of the journey of AI? What's interesting you, or what's keeping you interested these days?
Yeah, definitely. So like I said, we are a consultancy. So in general, whatever I see market traction and the opportunity to land new clients, that's what interests me. I mean, as a natural definition. So now to be, elaborate a bit more on that. So this conversation, I mean, literally this one is very interesting to me because, like I said, I did notice a pickup in the interest. So we have quite a few inbounds on people trying to do some magic with ChatGPT specifically, actually a lot more than just generally GPT. But I also see like a gap between their expectations and what the technology as is can actually deliver. And basically the other thing that I noticed is that so many people see these and how these things are packaged like by OpenAI as the way of the future. Like, okay, this is how things are now gonna be, that we have like AI as a service basically, and then that's gonna be the way to integrate things. And this is something that's like violently different than, for instance, how we operate. So for instance, if we need to do, like I said, we are mostly computer vision and image synthesis, but how we operate is not that we like call DALL-E to generate something for us, but we build our own generative models. And if we need to do anything interesting, then it's going to be a pipeline of several models that are counteracting with each other, and they are very often trained together in a meaningful way, etc. So, for instance, to solve problems, we must do many things that are like R&D heavy lifting, and it's completely impossible to integrate like a ready-made AI as a service anywhere in the pipeline. So we would need to have like basically the open source version of these things to be able to really seriously work with them. And so basically, so my mindset is both like I'm more like an engineer, researcher type of guy myself, and I see the trends in the industry, and since the two really doesn't add up to me, I'm just super curious to hear what is people's understanding, on CEO level about these technologies, and also I'm interested to find like-minded people who understand that, okay, I mean, these are all great, but basically pretty much just showcases of what is possible. But then if you actually want to have some, competitive edge above the rest, then you won't be able to shy away from getting your hands dirty and do the R&D bit.
Yeah, really interesting. Really interesting. And what are the clients that are inbound to you? Have you started to work with any of them that you can kind of talk about? Like, what kind of implementations, or kind of is it just more of an advisory, or are there actual tools that you're kind of saying like, okay, this is we're going to start doing copywriting services for you, or is there anything that's turned into a tangible kind of offer?
Well, not at this point, honestly, because I mean, with the client, yes, we could agree on things, for instance, related to applications in the legal domain, or kind of assisting people with, so basically assisting the way how you can interact with productivity tools. So I did see quite a few interesting ideas that, so basically we have like a gentleman's agreement on like, okay, this is a scope, this is something we should investigate. But then you know how it goes. I mean, most of our clientele is a startup, and funding is not exactly great these days for them. So basically, so many times people are coming to us as an inbound when they are just in the phase of, okay, let's put the team together, and then they are happy, like, okay, we want you on the on the pitch deck, but then whether they actually succeed with raising the necessary amount of money, etc., so that if it will materialize as like a real contract, that's another matter. And yes, I kind of heard the question behind your question, like yeah, so far I don't see many things actually materializing on this basis of hell yeah, let's just use GPT for something fun. So it's not, so the tractability and the viability is a big question mark for
I think maybe in the coming weeks it'll be interesting as that kind of evolves, and kind of just seeing kind of as you lock in kind of new contracts and things like that, and seeing what that looks like is definitely interesting.
And again, so on our side, so we try to make it clear that what are the missing elements, where do you need to put in the extra R&D, and then we actually would really love to have a project to be able to put in that extra effort, because being a consultancy also means that like rolling out our own products and services is pretty much a conflict of interest, so we don't really do that. So yeah, I would say that I would be super happy to land any of these deals, because that's like a prerequisite for us to actually jump in and do the work. But yeah, so.
Gotcha. Hey, Harvey, I had a question for you. As you're kind of going through the news and being in the healthcare space, are there any kind of studies or people that are kind of thought leaders that you like to follow that are really interesting, or any studies that you like to, that like, if somebody talks to you about like AI and healthcare, you're like, oh, that's an article that you have to read, or that's a person that you have to follow?
That's a good question. Unfortunately, I think it's fragmented. There is not anyone that I know of. I know there's different societies in AI, and I know there's different leaders, but the different leaders, when I look at their material, it's very, very specific, scientific. It's very specific to showing algorithms and the database graphs, and it's very, very science based, which is good. But I'm not getting a lot of real applications from them, or articles. I'm getting more of like, hey, there's another database that we studied, and it was Gator. I think there was one that was called Gatortron, and then they talked about bio, and then they talk about different databases that are coming, but it's more on the science side, if that makes sense. So what I try to do is use my MD and my background and listen to these conversations and say, okay, I can see this or I can see that, and then try to combine and be that person. And I think for now, I haven't seen anyone, but if you guys know of anyone, I'll start following people that are doing this niche.
Yeah, I don't know anyone either in the healthcare industry except you, Harvey. But I do think it's interesting to see that it's not very big in the healthcare industry. Maybe at least it doesn't seem to go that quick if you compare it to things like copywriting, SEO. I think content creation it's very big. I just had a call with this guy Martin from Kranenburg, and he's a copywriter. He's very big in AI and copywriting. He's kind of a thought leader. I think it's worth a follow.
Oh, thank you for sharing.
Actually, Harvey, one question to you is like, what's your opinion on therapeutic applications? So basically, assisting therapeutic applications, in particular to psychotherapy and things like that. So, do you think is that something that could be, of interest in healthcare? Because I understand that probably you would have some problems with the FDA if it was claimed to be like a therapeutic application, but even I could even imagine small things like just convincing people to actually fill in their oh, sorry, I don't know how you call it in English, like emotional diary or something like that. That's like so in a more engaging way, like. Yeah.
No, I'm actually investing in different companies that are using AI in the mental care space. I think there's on a profitable side, I think there's a lot of money to be made on that side. Not that I'm trying to take advantage of people that have mental health. It's just that it's a hole in our healthcare, and a big hole. And a lot of companies and hospital systems are neglecting mental health. And because there's a hole in the market, it has to be filled. And so to me, I was just talking to different companies, actually, even today, about how AI can be used in mental care. I think from an ethics point of view, big picture, I think the patient needs to know that it's an AI speaking to them. And I foresee a future where patients are not going to want to see a doctor, but they're going to want to talk to AI therapists because there's stuff they only want to tell a doctor. I mean, their computer, because no one's listening. That's a human being. So that there's a lot of ethical stuff that's coming. But I think fast forward, just to put it in your ear, there's technology that already exists that based on your voice, they can tell you if you're coming down with Alzheimer's or depression. There's different diseases just with voice recognition. So with mental health, it makes sense to combine the two. So that's my 2 cents.
And in general, do you also so basically there's like an applied part of this of how can you derive practical applications for mental care, but also do you think if some traction could be found for more researchy applications? Because if you like follow psychology, they have a long history of struggling with finding objectivity, both in methodology. I mean, you go to like a like a cognitive behavioral, like you pick 2 cognitive behavioral therapists that should kind of do the same thing because it's a defined methodology, yet you will see very different treatment from them. So it's what they're supposed to do is not exactly standardized, and the way how you should diagnose and detect things is like there are some standardized questionnaires, but rarely used. So they probably don't function very well for practical purposes, and so on and so forth. So what I'm wondering about is that if we could open channels of discussion, so to basically get as close to the raw data as possible, from the patients, then it could lead to opportunities of deriving like better diagnostic standards, and we could basically, with collaborative filtering and stuff across, similar clusters of patients, we could derive with ML better methodologies that could be like proven to be effective in treatment, and so on and so forth. So just by getting access to like a large population of people in need, then we could improve a lot on the therapy itself. So what do you think? Is this something that could drive some level of investment or interest, or is it something that's like, they try to do?
No, I think everything you said is already, there's different silos and companies that are working on this as a problem, and there's multiple startups in mental care space. And now with the boom of ChatGPT, it's almost a race to all of this. And especially I've talked to multiple companies that are waiting for the ChatGPT API to come out so they can integrate it into their product. Obviously, we've touched this subject in that training ChatGPT can be expensive, and so they're looking at creating their own models, and that's where I go back to the BioGPT, and there's just so much that could be done. It's just a matter of laser focusing on which product you want to develop and which way, because I mean, you could spend your whole life just trying to develop all of them. So I think you just have to pick your poison and go. That's just my opinion.
That's a good point. I always tend to do too many things at once, and thanks for the reminder, because I just suggested, for example, the idea that at the beginning of this conversation with the screen behind you, where we can change the background. It's a very, very cool idea, but I have to focus on making this integrated environment where you can work with your documents and using AI tools. That's what I'm working on.
That's awesome. No, I'm honored to be with all these great minds and hearing everybody's angle and how they're attacking problems and what they're doing, because it makes me excited, because I'm not getting any younger. So the older I get, the more I realize I'm going to be using all these tools.
Yeah, and I think it's really cool, because you said you had 30 apps at some point in the store.
Yeah.
So because I feel that this is indeed a new wave of different types of applications, and instead of having an application where you have to click buttons and go into screens all the time, you'll probably have assistants, right? Like ChatGPT-like systems where you can just talk with those things, either via chat or voice.
Yes, correct. Yeah, it's exciting. And that's what I've been doing personally. I'm being more of a consultant to different startups and helping them. And as a consultant, then I can either, just kind of have a play in the game in a way, because then I have somewhat of ownership, but that way I'm not trying to be developing one product. With that said, I do want to develop one product, but I don't want to be the main person. I want to be more an advisor or part owner or something. That's kind of what I'm looking for.
Are you then also invested in those companies that you consult, or is it?
I do a combination, but the ones that I think it's probably double hedging. It's probably not a good idea. But I almost feel like there's certain companies that I think are going to be home runs, and I want to invest and be an advisor to maximize the profit if it goes. And then the way I see it, if I'm putting my time and energy and mind to it, then I want it to prosper. And if it is, then I want to obviously make the most out of it. So
yeah, that's great. Do you maybe have some advice for people that want to invest in AI?
Oh, that's a tough one. I'm going to say go with what you know best. I'm a doctor, so I know healthcare, but I don't know your industry, right? So you're an expert in your own field, and put the money where you know best, if that makes sense. Because as a doctor, I can look at million of startups and then I can see it and like, yeah, that looks good. But as a doctor, and I worked as a doctor, that'll never be used. So people invest, but not realize that's never going to sell. And
Yeah.
so same application to you, you know your space, you know your industry, know that industry, and really exploit it with AI, because then your creativity and your expertise come together and create something new that no one else has, and that's your secret sauce.
Yeah. Yeah, and I believe that Fred, you're also investing, right? Maybe you can add something.
Yeah, well, I was investing, but not on a very big scale. It's mostly my own money. It's not like I have a hedge fund.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I was wondering about like hedge funds. So isn't like for crypto there were lots of like different bundles where you could just put your money and then it would grow. Do you know if there's anything like that for AI, or more in specific, maybe ChatGPT related or GPT related?
I did see something in the news this week, and maybe if you find it, let me know. But I saw something where somebody created a hedge fund that was just for AI, and all they do is invest in AI. So you can, in theory, invest in their fund, and then you're investing into everything they put their money in.
Yeah, that would be probably way less risky than finding all the small startups yourself.
Yeah,
and also way less work, because you would just be able to put your money in one place.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Okay.
Yeah, like I guess they do an index. They do a curate. They curate which they think are the best companies in different stages. And how much risk and stuff like that. There's a lot that goes into evaluating a company, and what's obviously the earlier the more risk there is.
Yep.
Yeah, and then also the more reward if you're lucky. But I guess that yeah, I would love to see something like that. So if you have any tips on that, if you have any resources you can share, maybe would be great. On like or anyone like, because I get this question a lot, like how can I invest in AI, and I don't know the answer.
Are you talking about AI or healthcare?
Yeah, mostly AI related or GPT related. That's what I'm most interested in personally.
Yeah, I think there probably are some out there. Again, there are venture funds like A16Z. I mean, they have different specialties and they invest in different things.
Yeah, it's interesting with these venture funds. Oftentimes there's kind of like a wall. Sometimes these venture funds are publicly accessible, and then the other ones are they might put out research, but they won't allow you to invest in their company. So having that kind of pool to get actual like retail access to some of these funds is, I guess, one of the biggest things. And then the other one is if they have a pool, it's kind of like how do they determine the weightings of the investments? So it's like you can have an early stage startup, do you give 5%, 1%, 0.5%, 0.25%, or is it like the weightings need to be looked at? But some sort of index is interesting for sure.
Yeah, if you're looking at investing in AI, one of the things you can do, if you're looking at Web3 type AI companies, if you go to CoinGecko, there's a category. They have different categories for different industries, and there's one for AI, and they list all the tokens that are related to AI. But right now, it's doing really well because AI is really being hyped, and you know, you have to look at
this probably doesn't have every AI startup though, because most AI startups probably don't have a crypto coin, do they? Right?
Probably, but I've been specializing most in the blockchain type or the Web3 type. But yeah, you're right. Most of them don't. Like Harvey would know more about that. Harvey, are any of your the ones you're involved with related to Web3?
Yeah, some of them indirectly are. It's interesting. It's like it's like an AI war, and they're all racing for their niche. I think to your point of just going back real quick to the hedge fund idea, you know, it's a catch-22. Very specific company, very high reward, but very high risk. Hedge fund, less risk, but not as much of a reward. With that said, if you want to keep it, I'm not a financial advisor, obviously. I got to make that disclaimer, but especially since someone's recording it, I'm kidding.
Me neither.
No, but honestly, from just as a friend to a friend advice, I honestly think stick to the staples. And I think Microsoft, with the huge investment in AI, I personally, I would put some money into Microsoft, just because fast forward 2-3 years, where are they going to be if they continue taking some search engine popularity away from Google? That automatically is going to bring millions to them, and I would say billions. And let's just pretend if they can pull it off, where they even decrease Google by 25%, man, that is just going to skyrocket their stock, and in a short amount of time. And so I foresee, I would not, I mean, I'm going to go on a ledge here and say I would not be surprised if Microsoft doubled by the time the U.S. has their next elections for president.
But I think one thing you also have to consider are the barriers to entry. I mean, Microsoft, might have an early lead or whatever, but I mean, there's a lot of things that smaller companies can get into as well. There are some advantages to having a lot of capital to put at a big project, but there are also some disadvantages.
Well, this is where I respectfully disagree. I think Microsoft is going to kill the little guy. I think if you go into Google Bing and you look at all the products that are coming, and let's take a Office product as an example. Think of how many plugins are and companies like Grammarly and all these companies that are going into Office products. Overnight, they're going to add ChatGPT to their Word program. Overnight, Grammarly, I think, would go down because Microsoft can just annihilate them. So all these little companies that are creating a little niche market, that Microsoft already knows where the APIs are going because they're asking Microsoft for the API. Then reverse engineer it. If they see this one industry just going crazy, they can go in and say, buy this company, or just create it themselves because they already have the background. So
yeah, I agree. But there are some niches where you're not competing with it. Like healthcare would be an example.
Yeah, but then I'm going back to Microsoft again. They created BioGPT. I'm pretty sure they're behind it. So if that's the case, then that's another niche that they're going to take care of. So I wouldn't be surprised in the next 5 years, all of a sudden we're seeing. I'm not totally disagreeing with you. I'm just saying, just keep an eye that they're going to have a lot of power, and just having that API and that search and being as big as they are and the investment they have in AI, they're not stupid. They're really going at this hard. And I'll say one more thing. If you look at the I think it was either 10 or 20 people that left OpenAI to start their own companies, there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
Well, because OpenAI is becoming large, you mean now, or changing their? Originally, it was an open source company.
Yeah, I think that's the reason, indeed.
Elon Musk. And it's completely changed now.
Yeah, I personally think there's so much technology in AI and there's so much money to be made that OpenAI, yes, it's open, but Microsoft sees the potential of it and sees all the silos that this can create and all the assistance that can be created, that it's going to be a war, an AI war to get there fast. And that's where they're going to start taking out all these verticals.
Yeah, I wouldn't discount Google. They have a lot of expertise, and people seem to think that Microsoft has an early lead, but Google hasn't really started aggressively going after that stuff, but they certainly have a lot of expertise. In fact, the original transformer model, which
came from Google,
which sort of caused this whole explosion with ChatGPT, I believe was developed by Google and put into the public domain.
Yep, so it was.
I wouldn't discount them either. They're huge, and they're many years ago started focusing on AI, whereas Microsoft has a lot of different areas they're involved in.
Yeah, I'm not discounting Google. I'm just saying a small percentage of the pie taken away from Google it's going to mean millions of dollars to Microsoft. And if Microsoft takes advantage of this, there's a reason why Google's stock went down 10% on the day they presented their competition to ChatGPT. And so I'm just saying, look at all the writings on the walls and just be cautiously how you move forward. Now, if you're right, then yeah, I would just dump all my money into Google now because it's at an all-time low. And fast forward 6 months, who knows? It may go up 30-40% in a short amount of time.
Yeah, it is really
a diversified portfolio where you want to have some with low risk, something like Google or Microsoft, and then there might be lower cap ones, mid cap ones, lower cap ones.
Oh, I agree with you.
I still think there's a niche or a place for
but there's also
innovative companies. Yeah. And one of the things about the huge ones is they don't have as much incentive to innovate because they don't want to cannibalize their existing.
Yeah, and that brings me to another question for you guys, because there's also going to be an option that there's going to be some very small startup that becomes very big in the coming years and becomes like comparable to something like Google. What do you guys think is holding those type of startups back at the moment? Is there anything that Google and Microsoft have that these type of startups might not be able to do?
What they have is capital, but I don't think they don't have the incentive to risk to do high risk things. Because they're enjoying and that's what usually happens in these industries. Google started off as a small little company. Microsoft started off as all these guys originally started off as small little companies.
Yeah, but I think that you don't necessarily need capital to become really big right now.
I agree.
Because you can do a lot with all the tech that's available and all the APIs you can integrate with.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. That's why I was talking about barrier to entry. I think the barrier to entry is lowering and lowering. It's not very expensive to.
Yes. So actually,
it might be that in 2 years from now, we are all using a tool that nobody's ever heard of right now, and it's being created right now, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. That's right. And
by Vinan.
And if it's something that disrupts Microsoft or Google or whatever, they don't want to do it.
One trend that I've been seeing, so Google made a recent announcement when they came out with Bard, is that they also announced 3 major partnerships. So it was with Cohere, who the guys that started Cohere were the original kind of people that wrote the Google Brain article. Then they left, and I think they raised $200 million from Google and kind of have more coming down the pipeline. And then there's also C3 AI. It's trading as AI on the stock exchange. And then there's one other one, I forget the name of it. But I think that's one way that Google is kind of starting to kind of almost venture fund these external subsidiaries that can kind of like move fast and don't kind of damage the reputation of Google if they do something kind of stupid or kind of off the mark. But then at some point, if Google wants to kind of bring them back into the mothership, then they can kind of do that.
So my experience is more so to put it somewhere on the map. So my opinion may be just too biased to be relevant, but basically, since I'm more on the researchy side of all this, I would agree with Fred on the barrier of entry. So actually, for a large language model, probably the data is not that accessible yet, but I'm pretty sure it's something that's going to be resolved very soon. So after that, the actual breakthroughs are happening via basically core foundational research results. I mean, that's the main reason why, for example, even Google didn't really try to protect transformers from themselves. So basically, these things are just happening, and I would say that the most disruptive things, or even just the small incremental ideas that were still not tried elsewhere, it's not simply that it's not so that it doesn't require a whole lot of capital. So I would say that what you need is more the expertise and the skills side on engineering, which does not scale that well with money, as a matter of fact, and also the anatomy of these projects is very often very sequential. So it's not like that. Like for example, for For an image generator, so for image synthesis, I would say that for most projects it's totally not like that. If I had like 10 data scientists on it instead of 2, then it would have been any faster actually. Like I'm not saying like that it's not 5 times faster. I'm saying that any faster. So there are many things in the chain of the experiments that are kind of sequential by nature, and you just got to go through with it. Obviously, what the big guys can do is to hedge these so that they have like many teams experimenting with things that may amount to something, but that's still not this all dominant position, no matter how much capital they have or how much they invest, that would guarantee that the next big breakthrough will happen within their own company. So I would say that by and large, it will be way more likely that it happens, somewhere else either in a new startup, or I know mostly it's going to be a new startup, but maybe an original idea from academia and just quickly branching off and do a startup kind of thing. So actually, I would really carefully follow those startups that are starting off with strong academic ties.
Thing, Harvey, as you're talking about Microsoft, is that Microsoft actually has a $1.9 trillion market cap, and Google has a $1.2 trillion market cap. So it's such a funny way where it's like they're actually, Microsoft is the dominant player in terms of like company size, but they don't dominate in search. Like Google is by far the winner in search. And so ChatGPT is kind of this like a direct attack at kind of Google search platform where they can kind of start to draw people. And a lot of those advertising dollars where they make so much money are so juicy. And I think that Microsoft hasn't had an easy way to kind of try to convince companies to say, hey, stop spending all your money with Google and kind of move those advertising dollars over to Microsoft. So I think that there's a huge opportunity for them to kind of start to steal market share from Google and kind of dethrone them a little bit, which is super interesting.
And to my point, you don't have to do much. I mean, think about it. You just said trillion. So if you could just take 1%, that's so much. But here's the beauty. I really, if you guys haven't played with Copilot, I know I haven't, but I've seen some videos. Man, that's going to be the future. And I know Google will come out with the product in the future with it. And that's why I call it the AI wars. Like, this is going to be fun to watch. Bottom line, we're all going to benefit from it because they're just going to be fighting each other, but the price eventually is going to just keep going down and down. But that's my whole point in this. Because they're fighting back and forth, they're going to want to be part of our daily life. So Microsoft, people at the top, Google, they're saying, okay, they're taking over the search engines. How can we integrate this technology into everybody? And so in the future, I don't see it far-fetched where we all have our own personal assistant through GPTs. And that's my point with this whole thing. I really think from the top down, it's going to be pushing. They're going to be watching all the silos. They have all the information. They know where all the Google, they know where all the trends are going. And so they're going to reverse engineer companies in that way. And that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, totally. I think you're totally right. It's definitely, it's interesting to see these companies. It's actually a really cool time how we can kind of see them all playing it out in real time, right? Like if you go onto Twitter, you can kind of see Elon Musk kind of poking the bear, or like it's such an entertaining thing, and it's starting to make the verified check mark worth more and more all the time.
Yep.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what companies like Apple are going to do, for example. They're also massive, and it seems to me they would want to get involved somehow.
Oh, yeah.
And they had Siri, they had success with Siri a long time ago.
Yeah. And like I personally was playing with my phone, and I have a video on my LinkedIn on how to connect ChatGPT to your Siri. And so I was showing my kids this weekend, how to use it. And so that if I could do that, and I'm not really that big in IT, then in the future, that's just going to be common. If I was Apple right now, I would figure out a way to create that interface, because that's
to voice. That makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah.
One thing I would actually like to see is I'd like to see the Amazon Alexa and Google Home and Siri start to tap into ChatGPT. Like I can't, like the number of times I ask Alexa these days for like a common conversion while I'm like cooking or something like that, like if 8 times out of 10, it's like she's just coming up with something that like I feel like I have a heavy accent that she can't understand. And it's just
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
well,
hoping that
Amazon's-
we can
I've seen
kinda
great
Amazon's another
results,
one.
and sorry. So I've seen great results already with open source language models or speech to text models like Whisper, and I definitely think you can at the moment even compete with something like Siri if you just make your own app, and that's what we're doing. So we have released or we are releasing it this week actually. It's now in beta. So if you want, guys, I can send you an invite. It's basically it's only for iPhone, but it does free transcription. And later we're also going to insert a real-time transcription and also connecting it with tools like ChatGPT.
That's really cool. And when in that roadmap, is there a way to, you know how I can on my phone I can just say Hey Siri or Hey Alexa kind of out of the blue? Is there a way to kind of turn that on?
That is very, very hard for iPhone at least, because they have kind of they're owning that feature only for themselves with Siri. But I feel that maybe we can create such an integration on macOS though. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be sweet.
Yeah.
Even if it's on the Mac, just to start playing around with it, being a beta tester. Happy to do that.
Okay.
Yeah, count me in. I'd like to play with it. I love technology.
Yeah, well, I will ask for a link, and maybe I can still share it in this meeting. Let me ask.
Cool. Sorry, guys. Unfortunately, I cannot stay for the end of the meeting, but it was great meeting you all, and I hope that I'll be able to join the next one. And I feel like I learned a lot from you. So I wish you a lovely day or evening, or depending on your time zones.
Thank you for coming. Nice meeting you.
I'm gonna also stop the recording now too, just to kind of cut it off, and then I'm gonna run too. But great chatting with you guys.
Okay.